5:15. This, I think they are trying to film this on Bourne TV, but there's some live feed problem, so I don't know what's going on with that. And does anyone know?
That's me, so
Yeah, you can't have your audio on.
I didn't think it was, so let me fix that. Okay.
Are we good now? Yeah. Yeah, we can only have one. And if we decide yours is better. Okay.
Are you the chair?
Hey.
Planning board?
How you doing?
Okay.
Still good, man. All's well?
Okay,
good.
so I think we might start just by kind of going around the room and introducing each other, so everybody knows who everybody is. I'm MJ Mastrangelo.
Is that nice?
I am currently the chair of this committee. Hopefully we'll
It's always
reorganize
green.
next month.
I can never get over how green it is.
You want to go next, Chris?
Sure, my name's Chris Hilberg. I'm the community member at large, and I've been involved with the committee for the past 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, you might have to speak up.
Oh, you can't? Yes, you can't. Can you hear me, guys?
Go ahead. You want to go, Peter?
Melvin Holmes from Conservation Commission. I've been on the committee from the beginning, I guess.
Neil Angel, I've been on it since the beginning, and I'm a representative of, I guess, Buzzards Bay.
North side, so you and Chris were the north side.
Yeah, north side,
Oh.
yeah.
Let's stick together.
John Duggan, I'm a representative from the Planning Board, and this is my second year on the committee.
Margaret Viali, I'm a representative from the Board of Health, and this is the first time I've been here.
Yeah, welcome.
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 Keith and Wayne and Kathy, you want to kind of go one at a time and just tell people that you're on Zoom?
Yeah, Keith Barber, I'm an original member of the committee, and that's about all I have to say.
Good evening, my name is Wayne Sampson, and I'm representing the Finance Committee.
Hi, I'm Kathy Fox Alfano. I'm the South Side General member, and this is my last meeting.
Yeah.
I've been on it the whole time.
Yeah, her term, Kathy's term expires June 30th, so we'll need another South Side representative to join us in case you know anybody who might be interested. Okay, so the first thing that we have is note excused absent members, and everyone is here. So that's great. At the last meeting of the Select Board, there was a discussion about continuing this committee or not continuing this committee. They decided that we'll continue the committee for the time being. I kind of made the case that it was good to have conservation and planning and Board of Health and Select Board and representatives of the community kind of all together to talk. And so, so they did do it. However, Marlene McCollum, our town administrator, asked to be removed from the committee. So she's no longer a member of the committee. So that was done. So we're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 people on the committee now. So I thought that we might have just a general discussion about sort of where we are on the comprehensive wastewater management plan. I mean, we submitted our draft, whatever our draft plan was, and whatever that filing was to MIPA. And it went through the public comment period. There were lots of public comments. And lots of comments from DEP. And then the issue came up as to whether or not the town was going to apply for watershed permits for Megansett, Squatigue, and for Finney's Harbor. And in the draft report, that was an undecided thing. When we submitted to MIPA, we hadn't made that decision. And so from my point of view, and I'm speaking just for myself here, we should be editing that draft final report to reflect the comments received, the fact that we are filing watershed permits, and also have some discussion about the recommended plan. In that report, the recommended plan for Phineas Harbor was a sewering plan for either connecting to the wastewater treatment plant at the middle school, which may or may not have some capacity and could be expanded maybe, or connecting to Joint Base Cape Cod. So that was the recommended plan for that area. For Megantic-Squatigue, the recommended plan was IA systems for, I think, 296 parcels or something. And then the backup plan was a sewer plan for 150 parcels. And it was only discussed as a sort of a small detached treatment plant. In the comments that we got from Buzzards Bay Coalition, they suggested that we should be talking to Joint Base Cape Cod to connect for Katomet for that amount, and which makes a lot of sense because I think it's only 36,000 gallons per day. The distance from that, where they showed the edge of the sewer system, which is kind of like the Katomet post office area, the distance from there to the sheriff's department, which is where the sewer pipes on the base go to, is only 4 miles. And right now they have capacity available, both for treatment and for discharge. I know that there's plans coming for mass development, but right now they do have. They are interested in talking to us. And one of the things that I thought about is if you put a pipe from Katomet up 28A and then across to the sheriff's department, you'd be very close to that intersection where the light is, that's right by Picture Lake. Yeah. And Picture Lake is a very condensed lake area that could probably really benefit from sewering. So some of the things that I'd like to talk about is whether this committee, based on the fact that we are supposed to be applying for watershed permits now, if we recommend edits to the report to reflect that, and 2, if we still feel that IA systems in Katomet is the best option, or whether we should look at sewering as the primary first choice option. And one of the things I noticed when I was trying to put together minutes for the last meetings that we hadn't, is that we had a meeting, I think July 23rd last year, and it's in the minutes. And in that meeting, environmental partners said that if we went for IA systems as our first choice, the DEP would require a special review process. And that actually is kind of what happened. We submitted for like a, single EENF, and they said, no, you're going to have to do much more detailed work. There were a lot of comments. So those are kind of my 2 focus areas. 1 is what we do about saying that we're with watershed permits. And 2, do we still think the recommended plan should be IA systems? Because when I looked at the numbers, compared the numbers, which we didn't even get till very late into the process, there's such a small difference between the cost of sewering and the cost of IA systems. And the maintenance costs are very similar. The question is what is going to be more reliable and what's going to be a better plan. So those are my thoughts. I'd love to hear what everyone else thinks. John.
I think that the long-term solution for the town of Bourne is to sewerage as much as we can. If done properly, it's a 0 infiltration. It can solve the problem of the language in the regulation that says using best available technology,
Right.
which could change next year and the year after. Also, from what I understand, a lot of the real heavy nitrate infiltration comes from summer use properties. And as we know, with the housing crisis we have, many of those may become year-round properties and may contribute even greater numbers.
Right.
So whatever plan today we have for IA systems may not meet the needs of those parts of town 5 years from now or 10 years from now as year-round housing is increased. I think in fairness to the residents, a sewerage system would be a far greater benefit than the cost of one of these IA systems and the ongoing maintenance and inspection costs that are associated with them. And then, of course, the threat of nitrates continuing to grow and being required to update their system again. I think on a temporary basis, if we were to consider trucking from Finney's Harbor to the school during the summer when there's virtually no use in the system would help. Expanding our sewage system, I know there's some things to work out with the Buzzards Bay operation, but also to expand the system at the school. And I like the idea of partnering with the base for their system. I think Falmouth would also like to extend to pick up some of ours to grow their system a bit as well. But I know there was talk early on about pocket systems kind of being frowned upon, DEP, EPA, and but I think really for the long term, our residents and our environment would benefit most from doing all the sewering that we can.
Anybody else? Well, Kathy's got a hand up.
Sorry.
You want to talk, Kathy?
Sure, yes. At town meeting, a gentleman stood up and said that the numbers we have, especially for Megansett, were old. And that, you know, the numbers that may be there now are totally different and could be less. And also that we need to coordinate with Falmouth because much more of the number of houses that are, we'll call it polluting the water is Falmouth, not Bourne. So we really need to find out what they're doing before we figure out what we should do.
To carry that point, were the numbers, I thought, were from 2018?
So George Seavers,
From Apex or from?
no, George Seaver, who was the person that stood up and said that the numbers for Megansett were old. There's a personal point of view of his on the way the numbers are done. So it's really hard to say. I mean, they are that number of houses, and the way that they calculated for the purposes of our report by using a, amount per house wasn't like cast in, not necessarily completely correct. But there's a lot of other things that are important in Megansett. For example, out on Amarita Island, they're all waivers. They're all waivers. You can't even put in a system that really works there. So, I think the area in the Megansett-Squatigue area is interesting, but I do think that there is evidence of degradation in that area that still needs to be addressed, no matter what Mr. Seaver's opinion is. I do think that coordinating with Falmouth is a good idea, though, especially if we were to connect to Joint Base Cape Cod, because then our sewer line would go all the way to that line of North Falmouth and Bourne, and then they could easily connect like into that. And I think that's a worthwhile discussion for us to have, whether they would consider doing that. So, and we haven't had a lot of conversation with Falmouth about about that shared watershed. And we probably should. So.
I have a couple of comments, if I could.
Sure, Chris.
Chris Hilberg, well, first, as a sidebar with regard to Falmouth, I think now that we have our ducks in a row a little bit, we'll be able to talk to them, because they've been kind of upset that we haven't performed to date. I wanted to follow up on what John was talking about, too, because I tend to agree with you, but not entirely. And the issue is that we definitely have different land structures here. So a system that will work one place simply won't work, like you discussed. Sometimes sewering is the only thing that's going to work in a lot of the locations we're talking about, water table, whatever it may be. So it's always going to be to me, it always has been a major factor in our process going forward, is what we're going to be doing. It's one of our options. It's a heavy, it has to be there. It has to participate. But, and the other thing that I think is a challenge for me personally is I was fascinated, because of my love of science too, is watching and looking at all these IA systems. I've gotten to know people, believe it or not, that fly to Nantucket every day with some of our equipment, our airplanes, that install these IA systems. And I've watched the progress over the last 4 or 5 years and been able to interview them and talk to them and so on, and watch their happy faces going to Nantucket and their not so happy faces coming back. You obviously know why, because 2 major factors with the IA systems is some of them simply don't work. They start off looking great, and then they just can't hold their, whether it be the wood chips or the lime or whatever is going on, they just can't seem to maintain the reduction that we're looking for. The BART, or what is it, best available reduction, nitrogen, BANRAT or something, I'm sorry, I always mess that up. So, and then the monitoring has always been a big issue for me, is how do we assess the monitoring? And that's still, a player to be named later with a lot of the towns that have really moved towards the IA side of things. That being said, I'm still believing in the science at some point, and that I do believe, I'm a believer in the pocket systems IA, that there might be some resolution. And my reason for saying that is because at the end of the day, we're going to have, if we start sewering some and not everybody, we're going to have an imbalance. And it's a financial imbalance. It's a we're sewering one group and leaving the others to figure out how they're going to create a system, whether it be Title V, whether it be something that's existing that's not an IA. Those are the challenges that we're going to run into, and we have to consider that with all the taxpayers in the town. So, but the biggest factor I want people to understand is this group has been watching and carefully observing the science, looking at all of the significant changes that have come from DEP on some of their recommendations and some of the things that they've asked. And I think we've made some good steps forward, but I would very much like to see a relationship with Falmouth and a sewering as we've kind of progressed, but we've got to really address the balance for those that can't.
Keith, you want to speak? I see your hand up. You gotta unmute.
Yep, so now I've unmuted. So I think there's a couple things that, and I guess I was at the meeting where the discussion about canceling this group. So I think what's missing is the big picture. We're focusing on Megansett, Squatigo, we're focusing on Phineas Harbor, or wherever we're focusing on, but we're not talking about the big picture. So has there ever been any possibility of hiring someone to study what or where we could do sewering. I live in a neighborhood that the street is a circle, and we have two streets that cut across. So we're probably a perfect example of somewhere that could be a mini system on its own. I'm sure there are other places in Bourne that could work also. But the big picture is still, it's missing. Today's Cape Cod Times had a story about Eastham spending $131 million on sewering. It's got to go to their voting next week. But, the towns on the Cape that are spending hundreds of millions of dollars are making progress. And we're just sitting around talking about it. And it's frustrating. I think that sewering, I'm part of this group here in Pocasset, and if I talk to anybody about IA, they ask me, when are we gonna get sewer? So it's maybe this isn't the right group, maybe it's not the right forum, but it seems like we talk a lot about going in circles and we never go forward. And that's I don't know if this committee needs a new charge, there needs to be a new committee with different people on it, but something has to go forward instead of spinning our wheels going nowhere.
Anybody else want to speak? I have, Wayne Sampson has his hand up too, so. Wayne, you want to go?
Can you hear me now?
Yep. Yep.
Oh, okay, great. So, I have been a strong component of a town-wide sewer system as much as possible. I think that Bourne is in a very unique position where it's not like a situation that we have to build our own treatment plant to handle the whole town. We have other treatment plants that we could tie into to save some of that cost. But I think that the bottom line for me is twofold. Number one, I'm very deeply concerned for every single resident. The cost of putting in an AI system, and that not only the cost of doing it, but the yearly ongoing cost is greater than what the yearly cost of to each household for the sewer charge. I come from a community that was 100% sewer, 100%. And it was just second nature to all of us. The sewer fees were always very reasonable. Certainly, it's expensive to if we were to do the whole town, it would be very expensive. But I think that right now you're talking about a very unique opportunity for one section of the town to expand the main line, to get down into some of the neighborhoods. We're talking about cleaning up our waterways, and from the other experts that we've heard over the last couple of years, they say that the sewer is able to get out a much higher level of contaminant than any of the AI systems or anything else out there. So I would be strongly in favor of researching the extension of this line, and keeping in mind that not only would it serve a very important area right now, but it would also have a main line that would give us possible options for further extension in some of the other large area of the neighborhoods. So that's my feeling. I'm very strong that we should be taking a greater look at the sewer system. As Keith was saying, or someone else was saying, people that are installing them, people aren't satisfied with them. They're not satisfied with the product or the cost, and yet any area that's sewered, we don't have those problems. So I would strongly support it.
So somewhere in research that I did, I got some of the history of the IA systems that are being tested out at the testing center. And there is the nitro system, which is newer, and it's not totally, they only have about a year of data on it. That's been pretty good, but it's still only 67% effective. And then the older system, which I don't remember the name of, the older IA system, and both of these are still like in some sort of provisional testing thing. The older ones started out really well, but then after a year, the ability to treat went way down, and they haven't been able to get it to go back. I mean, this is all the numbers. They're tracking all the numbers of what's going on. So I mean, one of the reasons it's good to get a watershed permit is to allow some of that technology to go forward. But I think when you come down to it, it's not cheaper. Like what seemed like a cheaper idea at beginning, correct me if I'm wrong, though, Keith. I mean, it's 60,000. Your quote for the nitro system, right? All in. Gonna unmute.
That's right. So, yeah, we have two, like I said earlier in the previous meeting, the frustrating part is that, there aren't enough people to do it. So we have a plan that's approved by Board of Health, approved by Conservation, and we sent the plan out to 4 different companies to get quotes, and 2 never responded. I followed up, and they didn't even get back to me. So the two quotes that we have right now are 72,000 and 68,000. Now that may sound wacky, but 28 of it is the nitro system. So, I hear your numbers, MJ. I'm not sure that everybody would agree with some of those. I'm in constant touch with Z. Crocker in Barnstable, and he has the nitro systems installed at Schuylkill Pond, and they're performing outstanding.
Yeah, no, they do have, but I looked at I looked at their data. I was able to get their data from the testing system, and most of them are doing really well, but some of them aren't working at all. And so in that rating system, they said 67, but that's because they put the one that's not working at all in with all the ones that were working. So it's a math thing, and I'm not sure it's
Statistics.
correct. It's statistics, and it's not a statistically significant thing. So I think they are working well in most cases, but there's still some cases where they're not.
Keith, can I ask you a question about that cost?
We discussed soaring. I mean, I don't know if this is updated, but it's in my head that the cost of soaring is over $100,000 per household when you include the plant, digging up the street, and that doesn't count connecting it to your home. So you have, there is a difference in IA versus soaring, but, as Wayne said, Jan and I, we lived in North Attleboro for almost 50 years, 40-something years, and we had town sewer and town water, and you don't even think about it. When the bill comes, you just pay it, because it's never thought of. So we're going to get if we do go forward here with a new system, we're changing from a 1,000-gallon tank to a 1,500. So we still have to have it pumped every 3 years. We have to have the maintenance. So sewering seems like a no-brainer to me. And, I would pay the betterment tax. I would run to town hall to pay it to avoid having a nitro, any kind of a on-site system. But we and I keep going back to my Cape Cod Times today with $130 million plan in Eastham. And if we had the research for all the towns, the Cape has to be well over $1 billion right now in sewering. And we're nowhere. So, our residents here in Pocasset, to a person, ask, why aren't we doing sewering when we bring up, you know, any kind of a IA or any kind of improvement? So I'm on the sewering train right now.
Well, Keith,
Okay.
if I could push back with you a little bit. First, I'm interested in your finance, your numbers, that the nitrous system was 28,000 by itself. I suspect you're having to change. The whole idea of the IA system, to me, was attractive to me was there were some plug-and-play parts with existing systems. So I'm talking about, we're from the north side of the canal, where it's part of Bourne too. How do you address the fact that it's unlikely sewering will make its way to the north side? Because Bourne, unlike Eastham and many other Cape Side towns, simply does not have the density of population for the land area. You get more bang for your buck connecting people in Eastham. Unlike Bourne, where things are spread out, we have more land, we have greater distances to cover, and oh, by the way, we have a canal in the middle. So how do you say to the people on the north side of the canal who are likely not going to get sewering, or I shouldn't say likely not, because we do have the Buzzards Bay, but again, that's kind of mired in capacity. So my question to you is what do you say to the people that aren't living in Pocasset?
So, that seems pretty simple. So they're not gonna pay a betterment tax, they're not gonna pay for the whatever yearly or quarterly sewer bill, because they're not getting sewering. So, the opposite to your point would be, Katomet is a densely populated village, so is Pocasset. So if, you know, we have to be careful, we're letting great get in the way of good. So can we sewer Pocasset and get 75% of the people? And in Katomet, could we get 60 or 75% of the people with the sewer system? And the outliers have no choice. They're forced to go the other way just from geographics. So, you know, I don't want to say I'm not concerned about the people on the other side of the bridges, but they're not going to pay anything for this. We're all going to pay for it. And that's everybody here. I'm sure they're not going to like me saying this, but the people here in Pocasset we want to improve our water. We want to improve our lifestyle, and most everybody is willing to pay just to get it done, to not have to.
I just want to say that there may be some shared costs of the entire town for some of the sewering costs, just like we did with the Buzzards Bay plant. We said the sewer users are going to pay 2.5 million and the whole town's going to pay the other 2.5 million, because there's a town benefit to having it. So I do think that there will be more costs on the individual homeowners but also if you do sewering, you take advantage of the Cape and Islands Water Protection Fund. You take advantage of the SRF loans and forgiveness, and you know there's a lot of benefit that you are not going to get if your primary focus is working on IA systems. And
So my follow-up would be to, you know, if the people on the other side of the canal are going to have to pay a share, do any of them come to any of the beaches on the south side? Do any of them go boating and dock their boat near Bassett Island and have a party on a Sunday? That water is damaged, and the whole town needs to fix it.
right.
You know, building a fire station, well, you know, unanimous vote to build the Southside Fire Station. There were people from Sagamore Beach who voted unanimously. They're gonna pay part of that, and they don't get a fire truck close by, or an ambulance. So, you know, the word community is just not used often enough, because that's what a town is. It's a community, and we work together for everybody, not just one group or another.
Hey, John, you wanted to say something?
Just thinking out loud here, I think on the north side, we don't have any nitrogen-sensitive areas, so the requirements wouldn't be on the residents.
I recognize that we're trying to achieve a particular nitrogen reduction goal. I get that, but that's part of it. I
Yes.
think that's the whole package, so.
I mean, and actually in the north side, there was a nitrogen sensitive area, and it was Buzzards Bay, and it was addressed way early, and then that was all we ever did, so. We were like, okay, yeah, we're good now. Anybody else have anything to say? I mean,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Can I just kick in?
Yeah.
I've said this before. Did you know that the Haley Driscoll administration just awarded MassDOT $416,000 for the urine diversion project? That's the green center that I've been talking about. So they'll do 25 systems in Falmouth. I think we need to watch that and see what happens because, as I've said before, the cost for that is, I don't know, not $10,000. And so that would save, I don't know, millions, billions of dollars. And it's actually a good thing. It nets profit instead of the opposite. So I think you need to really just keep watching that because that system is working, not so much in America because they haven't tried it, but in Europe they use it a lot and it works. So, and it's not a big change. So something to think about.
I agree with you that in the long run, and thinking once you get a watershed permit and you're thinking 20 years, that technology and how they would do it would it probably makes a lot of sense. The solution to pollution has always been dilution, but that's not necessarily the best solution in the long run. So where do we want to go with this? I mean,
Well, Keith did bring out a question,
what was that?
which was, is there a mechanism now that we've responded to have somebody look at the big picture? And I know we spent a lot of money with, was it Apex now, or it's Environmental Partners?
So this is kind of where one of the reasons I wanted to have this meeting is we have a draft report that hopefully you've all kind of looked at the draft report. And in that draft report has some edits in it from comments that DEP made. In other words, changing general use IA system to BANRAT system. The change that they made for the IA system plan, calling it the individual homeowner upgrade plan. So those were changes that were incorporated in the report. There's other things in that report where there's a proposal for, with watershed permits and without watershed permits. And I think this committee should make a recommendation as to whether we think the report should have edits to reflect the fact that we are filing watershed permits in 2 areas. And my concern is having a report that isn't edited to have the conclusions reached. I mean, it's not going to be a comprehensive wastewater management plan because there's a lot that has to go into it. But we need to have a draft report that reflects sort of the opinion of this committee or the select board and the sewer commissioners as to where we're going forward that gives us somewhat of a roadmap. I'm really concerned about just leaving the report as it is and accepting it and having it be inconclusive and not incorporate the comments that were received in the comment period. I mean, I personally have come to the conclusion that for Megansett-Squetig, we should be looking at sewering as the first choice option.
That's right.
I don't think it makes sense to look at IA systems as the first choice option. And I think that this committee should should think about whether there's recommendations that we as a committee want to make to the select board and to how that report should be edited to reflect what this committee thinks we should be doing forward. I mean, one, in reflecting that we were at least doing watershed permits in those two watersheds. And frankly, when Pecasset and Pecasset River get their TMDLs, I'd recommend filing watershed permits on those. I think if there's a TMDL, we should file a watershed permit. Because I think it's our responsibility as a town to address the issue and not just leave it on the homeowners to sink or swim on their own.
Madam Chair, would you entertain a motion? And
I just wanted to ask.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
right.
let Margaret speak.
I missed a little bit of what you just said. TMDL, Finney's Harbor has one, Megansett, Squatigue has one.
Yes.
Right. And are we not filing a watershed permit for both of them, or a notice of intent for both of them?
We should be filing notice of intents for those two watersheds, preferably by June 30th, but no later than July 7th of 2025. The select board voted that.
I thought you were saying that we are.
Yeah,
We are. Okay.
we haven't done it yet,
Yes.
but we are supposed to.
Well, before we go, I just want to say I agree. I agree with, the sewering, but I was very interesting. I was glad to hear what you had to share, Chris. And I wanted to hear, more about the imbalance issue that you were saying, and that, so I think that the whole, and I'm not necessarily speaking for the whole Board of Health, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
But because of course for the Board of Health, we're always dealing with IAIA, because that's, variances are being brought before us. And we are looking at regulations to, so it wouldn't be, even if we flip-flopped and basically said that we, instead of going to the general use or the like the initials, BAN, whatever.
Right, BAN,
says, that those are not our primary, goal to address nitrogen here in Bourne, but instead sewer. That doesn't mean we aren't going to have IA systems, and I would like to see. Could you let me know the data that you were talking about and the testing data?
Yeah.
I would like to look at it and have us look at it.
I'll see if I gather a lot of information, and sometimes I find it and then I can never find it again, but I was able to find it, so I will try to share that.
Maybe I could have you, if you find it, text it. I can send you. I think it would be good for us to
And you might
look
be
at
able to
that.
find it right from the Mass Tech website, like from the testing center. I think that's where I may have found it. But it was very interesting, because there's, I think, Nitrex is the one that's been around for a while. And it was really, really effective, like the first year, and then it went through a winter or something, and the numbers
Well, the
just.
technology is not there, but like we're saying, it can be.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to always need them in certain areas, special areas. It's not like we're throwing them completely out. We're just turning it around and saying our primary would be sewer, and then also we would have IA.
Yes.
It'd be silly for us to not consider the
And
evolving
they
technology.
probably will
of course.
improve.
And the idea, though, the other point that I was trying to make is the plug-and-play systems.
Yeah.
You all know how we got
And how
electricity
how are they
because whale
working?
oil,
I mean, I know what you're
like
saying.
wires went into lighting that used to burn whale oil.
So
It
you're
just
saying we're not
worked in
getting
the
rid of,
systems.
you're saying we don't want to get rid of the traditional systems, but we can actually bring in, instead of just completely defuncting them, we can bring in certain elements that could be actually added to them.
That's my understanding of a lot of this and my conversations with the different people in the community. But Keith actually brought out a very valid point, is that he had a very expensive overhaul cost. My guess is it probably was due to having to replace the tank, to change the size of the tank, changes the other systems related to it. There's midpoint systems in these things that can cause a little bit more money. The nitro part of it, I think, was 28,000, I think
Yeah.
you said. So, which really surprises me, because I had numbers of an existing system, modification of an existing system of a family, of a 3-bedroom or 2-bedroom house was 15.8. And obviously that was a few years ago, but
Right.
still, and I think unfortunately some of those systems that we're modifying with the, again, I forget which one it was, wood chips or whatever it was, just haven't been able to produce. And my understanding too was part of that was because they froze. And then it would cost a lot of energy to keep them warm. And so the fermenting didn't work.
The functionality drops when
Right.
it gets cold.
Right. So, there's a couple more questions, but obviously, to me, I firmly believe, and again, because as I started, I think sewering is our primary opportunity to help remediate the most for the long-term plan. Are we going to be sewering the entire town? I don't see that happening. We have to recognize that. How does the betterment tax work? What about someone that looks at the cost of a betterment tax and the cost of water and sewer and decides, I want to opt out? Keith mentioned that maybe 75% of Picasset people might be interested, 65% of Cotuit. Those are all, do we provide that flexibility to the members of the town? Those are some decisions that are hard, but we have to make them. And I think, I absolutely believe that a committee like this has to really delve into it.
Yeah.
And usually, when the sewer goes by your house, you have to connect.
That's correct.
Usually, so if we say, we're not gonna sewer Wings Neck because they're 2-acre lots and they're, but the Board of Health may say, when they replace their systems, they have to put in an IA system. I mean, I don't know, and hopefully it'll be better technology.
Yeah.
There were a lot of people that were concerned when we had our when we had the public come to talk to us about what we were doing, and encouraging us to file the watershed permits, because many people feel that the cost of the IA systems now is very expensive. For an existing system to upgrade to an IA system is very expensive, and the technology isn't there yet to make it worth the money that it costs.
And then the second part to that too is people have come to me and said, tell me about this monitoring thing. There is a conversation there too, so.
Yeah.
It can cost $2,000 the first year.
Unless you can get a big group of people that are all sharing the monitoring, but again, you're right. And there is Big Brother.
One of the difficulties with that is that the average consumer doesn't know that if it is performing how it should in the first year, you can go from 2 monitoring services a year to 1.
Yeah, it goes down.
But none of those companies let the consumers know.
Really?
Yes.
Well, surprise,
Well,
surprise.
yeah. But one of the things that really struck me, and I don't feel that we ever spent a lot of time looking at the numbers. In the opinion of probable construction cost, which I've had some people say that the Banrat system costs were way lower, where they were like figured at 42,000. No, that they were lowballed in making an estimate. At 42,000, they said the Banrat systems for Megansett, Squatigue are 12,092,000. The sewering option was 13,850,000. For that cost differential, it makes no sense to like do that ice. I mean, just from a numbers perspective, it makes no sense, because that 12,092,000 it's not the 60,000 or 70,000 that if you did that, it would be 24 million to do the, yeah. So, did you want to make a motion?
I would love to make a motion. I'd like to make a motion that we make a recommendation to edit or make draft changes to include the watershed permits for both Muscatine, Finney's Harbor, and to have a primary goal of sewering as much of the town as we can, and keeping in mind the difficulty to do the entire town that way, we would be using a combination of sewerage and Banner IA systems.
Okay, I talk pretty fast, write pretty fast, but. Is there a second? And I can read it after.
I'll second.
Okay.
That was Wayne?
Yes.
Okay. So, to recommend to edit the draft, to include watershed permits for Kansas, Muskegon, Finney's, as, with the primary goal of sewering as much as we can, but recognizing there will be, we will be utilizing combination of sewering and ban rat throughout the town, right?
Individuals, individuals.
I'm sorry, what is, sorry, Keith, there, what is ban rat?
Best available nitrogen reducing technology. That's the,
That's the new term for
that's the
IA.
new term for IA systems that they didn't want us to use, general use IA systems, because they don't meet ban rat. So that was one of the big objections that DEP had, is that we based a plan that wasn't based on best available nitrogen reducing technology. And so they definitely wanted those edits.
And Keith, just to reiterate what John said in the very beginning of the conversation is, what actually is best available?
Well, yeah.
What does that actually mean? And at least we know with sewering, we are doing and have the opportunity to help improve, but we are doing the best available.
Well, in my case, the best available, if we go ahead and do this, and we're talking about doing it in the fall, 2 years from now, something comes up that's better than what we did.
Correct.
Right.
How does that apply? We're gonna spend all this money, and then all of a sudden, somebody's gonna say, well, that isn't really good enough, you gotta do this now. So, just to review on our specific case.
I have to imagine
So,
they're gonna be
this house was built in
grandfathered.
1978, and we still have the original Title V system. So, it was tested in the fall of 2023, and the answer was barely passed. So we're going to have it tested again in late August, because we're going to hope to fail, because if we fail, then we can get the 2% loan from Barnstable County.
Right.
If the system doesn't fail, then we have to pay 4% interest for our loan. So, so our system, we live on the Pecasset Salt Marsh. It's in our backyard. So we have about a 3/4 acre lot, and the current system is in the front yard. So we cannot retrofit because the system is 50 years old, and we can't retrofit because there's not enough space to do it. So the reason our system is gonna cost so much money is because we have to fit it in to a tiny parcel that, needs, the IA wouldn't fit now. We have to start over again, basically from scratch, tear everything up and start from the beginning. And that's the reason the cost is that high. So we do have people currently in Bourne, and the Board of Health probably knows about this, who are replacing systems, but they're leaving a space for a IA tank potentially down the road. There's one being done right over on Kenwood, or in the Kenwood neighborhood right now, that there's a space left for inserting an IA tank at some point down the road. So, that line needs to be fixed, which is best available technology, because it's scary.
Well, that's the DEP regulations. I don't know if we're gonna be able to do anything about that.
But my other point, let me just finish another point.
Yeah.
So regarding that motion, what would be the situation if that motion included, that said we do watershed permit for any Bourne watershed that becomes a
TMDL.
nitrogen-sensitive area? So we know that Pecasset, Redwood
Yeah.
Harbor, Pecasset
that'll work.
Harbor, the TFDL has been submitted, it's in process. The best guess is that it will be approved or accepted, whatever the word is, in the middle to the second half of 2026. So at that point in time, then we live in a nitrogen-sensitive area. Bourne should immediately or automatically or be required to add a watershed permit for that watershed as soon as it becomes nitrogen sensitive. I know that's way too much to put in a.
No, but I could say, to include watershed permits for Megansett, Squatigue, and Finney's Harbor, and for any watershed that becomes a nitrogen-sensitive area.
I think that's excellent.
Yeah. You can addend the motion.
So do you want to amend, is you okay with amending the motion?
Yes.
And then,
You okay with that amendment, Wayne?
Yes.
Okay. Is there any further discussion on this motion? All right, we're on Zoom, so we have to do like a roll call. So, I'm just gonna kind of go around the room and then go out to Zoom land. Okay, Margaret,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Neil,
Yes.
Yes.
Chris.
yes.
MJ votes yes. And then Wayne
Yes.
and Kathy
Yes.
and Keith.
Yes.
Unanimous.
900. It is unanimous.
So can I bring something up now?
Yes.
Are we gonna make a motion that we all are in favor of leaning towards dealing with Falmouth and also trying to connect to Joint Base?
Great idea.
That's the way. Joint Base Cape Cod. Because I think we should definitely, should be reflected.
For sewering options.
Right.
Well, Finney's Harbor, Megansett, Squatigue, and any other nearby.
Some of the
And,
points that Kathy mentioned too, or George Seaver did.
That appears to be extremely cost-effective,
right.
if we can do that.
And I've had a couple of people say if we want to do it, we should get in the conversations.
So what does the "we" look like? I guess I would ask, to follow up on that question, Peter. Is it a group of, a few people from this group that goes and reaches out to Falmouth, or is it something we direct the
Well,
town?
right now, we would be recommending to the select board.
Okay.
Right.
Recommend to the select board
So part of that recommendation might include who?
that,
Does the select board actually assess or decide that? Sewer commissioners, same thing.
they have to accept it and then decide whether they want to delegate any of that.
Okay.
But, I mean, I think it's kind of under the town administrator, so, and we're gonna be talking about consultants, and one of the things the town administrator said to the select board at our meeting on June 17th was that if we were gonna go with IA Systems, we might use a different consultant than if we were gonna go with sewering. And there was some saying that, maybe we wouldn't have an RFP out, we just like use the workaround where, because it's horizontal or something, you can just solicit, you can just enter into engineering contracts. I think if we recommend that the sewering be the first choice, that we would be making a recommendation to the select board that,
Remain with the current consultant?
Their
no,
water,
Oh,
yeah.
no.
no, okay. Good, that's good.
No, we're definitely going to a new consultant,
Okay, good.
I think.
All right.
But,
And maybe, to some extent, that's how you do,
I mean,
build a
one of
bridge
the
with
things
Falmouth.
that Marlene said was Wright Pierce is a consultant for Falmouth. And they've been working with the base on the concept of Sandwich connecting with the base. There have been some issues with that financially, where the Inspector General has said, well, it's privately owned now, so they're working through a legislative fix for SRF, for like how that would pan out. GHD is the primary consultant, I believe, in Falmouth and in Wareham, and I think GHD was the one who, she said, if we were gonna go primarily with IA Systems, and then she said, well, maybe you'd have GHD in Megantic-Squatigue if that was your, IA Systems was your primary, and then,
Pierce.
and Wright Pierce. So I think what the direction of how the consultant's going to be chosen and whether it's going to be through our RFQ or some other process that's going to be up to the select board to kind of work through. But if we feel that that given we're talking about sewering being the first choice option,
That might be where we lean.
yeah, so with the recommendation that sewering should be the first choice option, that coordinating with Falmouth or consulting or working with Falmouth and discussing connecting to Joint Base Cape Cod for sewering options for Phineas Harbor, Megantic-Squatigue, and any other watershed areas
Right.
that might be connected. Is that your motion?
Yes.
Second.
Okay. Motion by Peter, second by John. Okay. And so recommend to the select board that since, or with the recommendation that sewering be the first choice option, that working with Falmouth and discussing connecting to Joint Base Cape Cod for sewering options for Phineas Harbor, Megantic-Squatigue, and other watersheds that could be connected. Okay. Okay. Any more discussion on that? You're muted.
So, one thing I don't know if we need to do this at this point, but, the charge for this committee probably doesn't apply, but somewhere along the line, there should be groups, one group to talk to Falmouth and a different group to talk to Joint Base, so we can move faster. So if we had two initiatives going at the same time, we would move a little faster than, I guess that's just my.
That's why my question, Keith, was, when we make a recommendation, when we say we as a town, who's the people, who's the group? And I guess the select board is probably gonna have to
They're gonna
first
have-
accept this
They're
and
gonna
then.
have to accept it and then to say if that's something, who they want to do that connection. And I'm not sure you do want a separate one, because frankly, I think that Falmouth at this point is looking at IA Systems and Megantic-Squatigue, because they don't really have a good option for connecting that. But if we were connected all the way to the Falmouth, and then they just want to tie in from Joint Base, that might make
That would help them.
that might help them, so. Okay, we're gonna have to finish up here pretty soon, because there is this sewer commissioners meeting here, and, but, all right, so is that it? Okay, we're gonna go around again, okay. Margaret?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Neil?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
Yes.
Keith?
Yes.
Kathy?
Yes.
Wayne?
Yes.
And MJ votes yes, 900. Okay. I think that's good. Is there anything else that we should, I think if we make those two recommendations to the select board, that helps give them direction on kind of where this committee is going. And I do want to mention that the Board of Health is talking about requiring IA systems for new construction.
Correct.
And that'll be interesting because a lot of the people were in the watersheds were like, if I'm going to be sewering, why am I going to put in an IA system? And so,
It's only gonna last a few years anyways. No, I'm kidding.
That will be, you know, for the people that are wealthy enough and who are eager to expand, then they will, you know, they're going to be required to do an IA system.
Well,
But
they're gonna sue anyways to not have to, when the sewering comes down the line, they're gonna say, I've only owned my building for X number of
Right.
years, and I don't wanna have to hook in. It just cost me X point million, so, you know, they're gonna sue the.
But what it might do too, you know, obviously, it's gonna discourage, some people may be discouraged and say, from building, from expanding, or,
Right.
you know, and they just say, well, I'm just gonna wait. You know, and that's not necessarily a bad thing either, because the point of this, these regulations is to pinpoint the people right on the water, you know, mega homes. It's not that we're against sewering, it's
so
just,
a lot of the towns have distances, like 500 feet from the open water, or 1,000 feet, and that's where they're requiring that the IA systems be put in.
that would be the
So-
number one priority, right?
Yeah, so the Falmouth Wastewater Water Quality Committee or whatever, they did an analysis of like those, what kind of regulations for the 500,000 foot and what the waivers, you know, that they looked at a number of towns and what their regulations were. So I think it's not up to the Board of Health to say that you wouldn't have to connect to the sewer. I think that's going to be something that the sewer commissioners or select board decides, but yeah, but I mean, I think some sort of waiver for areas that are identified as potential sewering might be something the board might want to consider. you know?
That was a question I had too, when I looked at them. I said, are we gonna be talking to people? Definitely, we need to be letting people know, because I heard earlier that a lot of people want to sell, that, you know, I mean, a lot of, you know, companies, their motivation is to sell these IA systems.
Yeah.
And, oh, here, buy, you know, yeah, you need them. And we need to just let people know that other options are imminent, and to think about, you know, expanding, and maybe, you know, that's. you know.
So in the draft report, there are areas that are identified in Phineas Harbor and in Megantic as possible sewer areas. And so that might be something you want to consider when you're making your regulations, of having wording in there that areas that are identified.
Well, they're right there in the report, you know, at least at least the Phineas Harbor is not, I don't think Megantic is, I'm not sure.
Yeah, so, we don't have a lot of time left, because I have to make sure that Matt can get in here and prep for the sewer commissioners meeting. I did, just want to say the wastewater advisory committee charge, I think there's things I think that we can do. I think it's good for this committee to stay, active. I don't know how you all feel about it. I think we can still give some thought, and I think it's good to have the different committees represented in a group. So do you all in favor of continuing?
Make a motion to continue.
I second that motion.
But not before.
Yeah. I don't think I'm gonna take a vote on that, because I'll just say the consensus is that we want to continue to work. And, we did get reappointed, so that was good.
I think there's so many facets to this operation that, you can't lose a board. This board, you have some expertise or some experience from just being on the board for the last couple of years. And I think that'll come in valuable.
My hopes is that the select board actually looks within this committee to help maybe develop those relationships with Falmouth and Joint Base Cape Cod and a few other things, because you can speak that language.
Yeah, yeah. And-
I agree with you.
Yeah. Keith, you have your hand raised?
Yes, I do, MJ. So this is something that bugs me. We have someone from the Board of Health in our group now. It would be a subject, probably maybe not even for this group, but how can we identify who in town still has a cesspool? Because if we're going to make any regulations about anything, those cesspools need to be targeted. I can tell you where 5 are right now. So if I can do that, there are a lot. There are cesspools on Patchawisset. There are cesspools in Pecasset Heights, and it's horrible. So, at some point in time, is there a way to go through town records by process of elimination to find out, okay, this house hasn't been updated or whatever that would be? When we first started the process of the wastewater committee, advisory committee, PWQC, our group, we volunteered to do the work if we could get access to town records, if that's even possible. So I just threw that out. And I do think the committee should continue. I said it during the previous meeting that you held, MJ, because as Neil just said, we have been doing this, some of us, for 5 years, and we've learned. So, I'm a costume jewelry salesman. So I'm like, 5 years, I'm like, holy cow, look what I've learned. So it would be a waste to disband this committee.
Thank you. So that, I think in the, one of the reports that we got initially, every piece of property is identified as Title V IA or an NA, and it's the NA systems that could be a cesspool, or they could be, there's some examples where they're not a correct Title V due to waivers. So how to get those Board of Health records updated in a way that it is really identified what's a cesspool, and how to really go after those. I mean, they haven't been legal for since the 70s. So there's just because there's no property title change,
Right.
there's no enforcement. And so I think that's one of the things that changed in Title V, especially in a nitrogen-sensitive area. You're not dependent on those title changes, so.
Maybe a combination of seeing what funding might be available, whether it's low interest, no interest, help for those residents that
Right.
aren't triggered by a substantial improvement building permit or a transfer.
Well, it's a failure, so they can
2%.
go to the board, they can go to the county septic loan program.
Yeah.
And I don't think they're giving zero on septic systems. I think
It's
they're only
2%,
giving
right?
it on connections. I don't know. I don't know. Anyway.
Do you want to
Okay.
approve the minutes?
That is right, MJ. That's the, 0 is for connecting to sewer, and 2 or 4, depending on your qualifications and on your situation.
Right.
That's what the ACU fund, that's what they do.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so there's not a lot on the minutes, but I do need to get the minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Second.
Third.
Is there any discussion? There may be a couple other meetings, but at least I got like what I could. Okay. All right, sorry about this. Is roll call. Margaret?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Yes,
Neil? Peter?
Chris.
Chris?
Yes.
Oh, that was
Keith?
the minutes, right? I wasn't here, I should have abstained.
You can abstain if you
I
want.
should abstain. I just realized I'm accepting minutes that I've never, at a meeting,
Yeah.
I wasn't at.
Okay, Kathy?
Yes.
Welcome.
Wayne?
Yes.
Okay. So 8 in favor, 1 abstention. Yeah.
You can actually vote.
You can vote, but,
Oh, I like these minutes. They're
Yeah,
great.
because your vote is spelling, grammatical, your vote to the integrity of the minutes, that's right.
yeah. All right then. Do we want to schedule another meeting? Does this time work for people? The Tuesday at 5, or is that not good? Or I'll take any suggestions.
It's fine for me.
Works for
And do we
me.
want to wait for the next meeting until the select board has had a chance to accept or do we want to review what their comments might be? Is that a meeting to review that?
I think we should, if we're gonna, do we want to meet like once a month and kind of make it
Just-
whenever the Tuesday is
Regroup.
the sewer commissioners, because then I'll come at 5 and stay till whatever.
We probably should do that, but at the same time, if nothing has happened, cancel the meeting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That'd be the way
I mean,
to
Need
we
to go
can
to
always
2
do it,
weeks,
but
then?
you know what? I feel like we ended up not having a lot of meetings when there were things that we could have discussed. And so if I can find a topic that we might talk about, even though if there's nothing like really
Yeah, that's
timely, and,
good.
you know, hopefully next time I'll be able to get the Zoom to work correct.
It'd be even worth just looking at the consultants that Falmouth used, IA consultant
Yeah,
versus.
there's a lot of information, or like to talk about testing results on
Yeah,
the
exactly.
nitro and the nitrix, just to have a conversation about it. Those are a lot of things.
You already have your next meeting agenda.
Yeah, and I will tell you when, if you would bear with me 1 second.
29th of July.
I gotta check and make sure that's when the next sewer commissioner meeting is.
Okay.
It might be.
MJ, this is Keith here. I would volunteer to talk to Brian up at Mass Tech to just try to get current data.
Yeah, that'd be great.
That's good, then he can send it around.
Soon.
Okay, that'd
Say
be
we
awesome.
talk to them and get the data,
29th works for me.
Yeah,
and then he can email it to all of us.
okay, great.
Tuesday, the 22nd of July would be 4 weeks.
I don't know that I
Once a
can make
month,
that.
so 29th.
All right, hold on, hold on 1 second. I gotta find my, hopefully this tells me when the next meeting is. It does not. I think Matt was right out here, so. Hey, Matt, do you know when the sewer commissioners in July is? Okay. Fully get it. It's either the 22nd or the 29th, I think. What? 28th, is that a Tuesday? Okay, 28th.
That's of July?
Yeah, it's a Tuesday, right?
Yep, that's
It is?
correct. Well, that's a
That's a Monday.
Monday.
Oh, well, it must be the 29th then.
Okay.
All right, so we'll plan on the 29th.
Okay.
That seemed to work for people, right?
Sure.
And we'll do the 5 PM thing.
Thank you.
29th is Tuesday.
Yeah, all right, thank you. All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved?
Is there a second?
Seconds.
Second,
Neil? And roll call, Margaret?
yes.
John?
Yes.
Neil?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
MJ, yes. Keith? And Kathy?
Yes.
Wayne?
Yes.
No, MJ, I missed the reason for the question.
The reason for the
It's a
question.
motion to adjourn.
It was motion to adjourn.
Yes.
Okay. And the next meeting's the 29th of July at 5 o'clock.
5 o'clock.
Okay.